Good evening, everyone. I hope I am audible and visible. Okay. Uh, in the last class, we talked about different kinds of meters and different kinds of variations. We have also discussed how English prosody is divided into two basic kinds of rhythms, namely iambic and trochaic. And we also uh, examined a few examples of the corresponding variations. Um, Today we are going to look at, basically we are going to uh, scan a few passages, and I hope this will give you clearer idea uh, of what scansion is all about. So I will begin with this passage. This is actually the second stanza of the poem that I did with you in the first class, Thomas Gray's Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. I hope Microsoft Paint, the software that I'm using, is visible to you. So this is the second stanza. I hope this is visible to you. So let's look at this passage. Let's look at the lines. I have already mentioned a few steps which you can follow. I'm not saying that this is the only way to do scansion. There might be other ways, but this is perhaps the easiest way to scan a passage. First, let's isolate the words that have more than one syllable. Okay, so what is a syllable? Syllable is a vowel sound, a sound made by a vowel. For example, this word here, glimmering, has two sounds, right? Glimmering. Notice that there is an elision. There should be an E here, which is replaced by an apostrophe, suggesting that this word has two sounds, not three, but two sounds. It's not glimmering, but it's glimmering. E is silent. Okay, so glimmering has two syllables. Landscape has two syllables. Where does the stress fall on glimmering? Which syllable is stressed? We'll come to that later. Let's isolate the multisyllabic words first. That's how we have to go about it. In the second line, we have solemn, which also has two syllables. Stillness, beetle, droning, drowsy, tinklings, and distant. These are the words that have more than one syllable, multisyllabic words. Okay. Okay, now that we have isolated, we have recognized the multisyllabic words, it's time to look at the important, quote unquote, important parts of speech, like nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. Let's look at verbs, nouns first. Fades, sight, air, holds. wheels, flight, lull, folds. Nouns and verbs are done. Come to adverbs and adjectives if there are any. Now save. That's all. Now the next step is to place the accent mark. Let's use a different color for this. Now fades, don't get confused by the word fades. It has two vowels but it has one syllable. We pronounce it as fades, and we do not really pronounce this E here. It's fades, one word, one syllable, one sound. Sorry, two vowels. Yes, two vowels, one syllable. So now fades, glimmering, where do you stress glimmering? I gets a stress because one of the rules, if you remember, of doing scansion is that you cannot stress a suffix or a prefix, and ing is a suffix. So glimmering, landscape, sight, air, solemn, stillness, holds, save, beetle. Beetle is two syllables. Beetle, the first one gets a stress. Wheels is one syllable. Droning, ing is suffix, therefore it does not get the stress. And you have flight. Drowsy, y is an addition, it's a suffix, so o gets a stress. Tinklings, lull, distant, folds, right? Now it's time to read the passage once again, and if you haven't read it aloud in the beginning, you should do it now. Remember that half the work is done if you read a passage correctly. It's all about reading, it's all about listening, right? So read it. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight, and all the air a solemn stillness holds, save where the beetle wheels his droning flight, and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight. So you have the sound of an iamb, right? Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight. 1 2 1 2, and all the air a solemn stillness holds. This is much more straightforward, the second line. So you get the sound of an iamb. But in order to be sure about it, you need to scan it well, you need to scan it correctly, and you need to look for iambs. And if you have found enough iambs in a line, it confirms your gut feeling that this is indeed an iambic passage. So since this sounds like an iamb, we need to isolate the iambs. We need to try and get as many iambs as possible. So in order to do that, you have to complete an important step in the middle, which is put the unstress or the unaccented syllable symbols wherever they are applicable. So the is never stressed. Suffix ing shouldn't be stressed here. Always put the stress or the unstressed mark on vowels, never on consonants. remember, we need to look for iambs. We need to divide the lines, divide the lines into feet or meters in such a way that we get only iambs. Of course, there will be variations. So where do you cut? Where do you break? Put the first division. Now fades, you have to break it here, because if you break it after now, you get an incomplete foot right in the at the beginning of a line. I'm not saying that this is not possible, but there can be asynchronous meters, but in this case it is not applicable. You could cut it after the, but you would get a figure which is not really permissible in English prosody, namely a meter composed of two stressed syllables followed by an unstressed one. So that's not possible. So the only option that you have is to have two stressed syllables, and as you know by now, this is called spondy, right? Okay, so the next cut comes after glim. Okay, let's cut it here for the sake of convenience. Glim, ring, landscape. Again, where do you cut? Where do you break the line? You could do it after the, but then you have three unstressed syllables, which is not possible. So you have to break it here. Okay, let's come to the second line. And all the air, solemn and stillness holds. Then in the third line, it begins with an accented syllable, but don't worry, you could have a variation here if you cut it after here, after where. Then you have the beat. Sorry, I forgot to put an unstressed mark here. So save where the beat wheels his droning flight. So that's done. The fourth line, and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. So we have divided the lines into meters. Let's count the number of meters in the first line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 meters in each line. So this is an example of a pentameter. And since the rhythm is iambic, it's called an iambic pentameter, right? So this is an example of an iambic pentameter. Now the only thing that remains is to identify the variations. So we get the first variation in the first line itself. The first foot is a variation. What is a variation in an iambic line? If you get anything apart from an iamb in a foot, it's a variation. So this is the first variation here. Now fades. Then you have first line, fourth foot, which is a pyrrhic. This one is a spondy here. Now fades. And then you have in the fourth foot of the first line a pyrrhic. I'll type it here again for you. So the first foot is a spondy. Let's use a different color. A spondy, and the fourth foot is a pedic, right? What does a spondy look like? It looks like this: two stressed syllables. And a pedic is just the opposite of that, two unstressed syllables. So fourth foot is an example of a pedic, first foot is an example of a spondy. In the next line we have the line opening with the sentence opening with a pedic and all, and then you have no variation whatsoever in the same line. In the next line you have a trochee. This is a trochee. What does a trochee look like? It looks like this: a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed one is a trochee. So, save where the beetle wheels his droning flight. The rest of the line is fine. There are no variations. And drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. There are no variations either in the fourth line. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 variations in the passage given here. So I hope this is clear to all of you. If there are any questions, you can go ahead, type in the chat box. Okay, good. So no questions. Let's move on to the next passage. This is also a straightforward and easy passage really. Let's take one stanza at a time. Okay, I hope this is visible. Okay, let's isolate the multisyllabic words. The first one is traveled, 2 syllables. Among. This is Wordsworth, by the way, one of his very famous poems. Beyond in the second line. England. And then you do not have any multisyllabic word. Okay. Nouns. Remember that the most important thing to do that you can begin scanning a passage with is to read the passage well again and again. That will give you a sense of rhythm. Read it in a correct way. So how do you read this passage? I travelled among unknown men in lands beyond the sea, nor England did I know till then, what love I bore to thee. Right? Then also happens to be an adverb, so the next step is to put the accents over the stressed syllables. I travelled. This is an addition, this is a suffix, travel. Also Don't think that travel has 3 syllables. It has two. It has two sounds. Traveled, traveled. Among, you put the stress on O. Among unknown men. Let's also accentuate these words as well. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. In lands beyond the sea, nor England did I know till then what love I bore to thee. So let's put the unstressed symbol. Unknown men in lands beyond the sea. The is always unstressed. Nor England did I know till then what love I bore to thee. I travelled. I forgot to put a unstressed mark here. I travelled where do you put the stress next? I travelled among unknown men, which is a bit uneven, the first line. In lands beyond the sea, no variations there. Nor England did I know till then what love I bore to thee. Right? So you have how many feet do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4. In the second line you have 3 feet or 3 meters. 1, 2, 3. In the third line you have 1, 2, 3 and 4. In the fourth line you have again 3 feet. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you have 4 feet and 3 feet in alternately. So you have to mention that in the statement that you write at the end of the scansion. After you have scanned the passage, you have to write a statement mentioning the prosodic name of the given passage along with the variations that you have found in the passage. So you have to mention that the lines are composed of different numbers of feet. The first and the third lines are composed of 4 feet, and the second and the fourth lines are composed of 3 feet or meters. Let's look at the variations now. First line, second foot is a variation. It's a pyrrhic. First line, third foot is a variation as well. It's a trochee. Remember, this is an iambic passage. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. In lands beyond the sea, nor England did I know till then what love I bore to thee. So clearly iambic passage. Anything other than an iamb is a variation, like we have it here. Pyrrhic in the second foot of the first line. Third foot of the first line is a trochee. In the next line you don't have a variation. In the third line you have variation in the second foot. Second foot is a pyrrhic. And in the fourth line, the last foot, that is the third foot, is a pyrrhic as well. So these are the variations in this passage. So I hope this is clear. Okay. Let's look at the next example. This is from William Blake. Read it first. Piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee, on a cloud I saw a child, and he laughing said to me. So what kind of rhythm is it? Piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee. Read the first couple of lines and it will be clear to you. Piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee. Piping down the valleys wild. Reminds you of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, doesn't it? Piping down the valleys wild. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. So basically the same rhythm, same syllabic arrangement. Piping down the valleys wild. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. So all of you will remember that this is an example of trochaic rhythm. So the multisyllabic words first. Piping valleys is 2 syllables. Again, piping in the second line. Pleasant, third line. All the words are monosyllabic, and in the fourth line you have laughing. So piping down the next we come to the important parts of speech. Down, wild, songs, glee, cloud, saw is a verb, child, said, right? So let's put the stress marks. Piping, because ing is a suffix, you don't really stress a suffix or a prefix. Piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee, on a cloud I saw a child, and he laughing said to me. Unstressed symbols. So since this is a clear example of trochaic rhythm, we need to find trochees. We need to isolate them. That is why you need to break the line after piping down the valleys while. So you have an isolated and incomplete foot at the end of the first line. What is it called? We'll come to that. Piping songs of pleasant glee. The same formation in the second line. Third line, on a cloud I saw a child, and he laughing said to me. Said to me. So said to me comes together, doesn't it? And he laughing said to me. It's not and he laughing said to me. It's not like that. And in any case, remember this is very important. Remember that you do not get an hypermetrical This is an example of hypermetrical. You cannot get hypermetrical at the end of a trochaic line. Trochaic rhythm, trochaic passages are not compatible with hypermetricals. If you have an isolated syllable at the end of a sentence in a trochaic passage, it always has to be a stressed syllable, because it goes like this: 1 2 1 2 1 2 1. Okay, so you cannot have an unstressed syllable here. If you do, then it's something else. It cannot be a hypermetrical. Okay, so piping down the valleys wild, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1, piping songs of pleasant glee. On a cloud I saw a child, and he laughing said to me. So it comes together, this unit here, said to me. 1 2 3 1 2, sorry, 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. It's like that. And as you remember, this is an example of a dactyl, something called dactyl, which I discussed in an earlier class. Dactyl. What does dactyl look like? It looks like this. In musical terms, a waltz sounds like this: 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Okay, the first beat is stressed always: 1 2 3 1 2 3. Listen to the Blue Danube waltz if you can, to identify this rhythm: 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. But here you get it as a variation. So let's identify the variations. In each line there is a catalectic, apart from the last line of this stanza. So the first 3 lines have catalectics. How many meters are there? There are 3 meters, trimeter or trimeter, 1 2 3, and then you have the incomplete foot, which is not a foot at all, so it doesn't count. So trochaic trimeter with a catalectic at the end of each line. And in the 4th line you have a pyrrhic. You have a pyrrhic here as well in the beginning of the 3rd line. And the first foot, the beginning of the 4th line, is a pyrrhic, and this is a dactyl. So it sounds like 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. Okay, so the speed increases a bit because there are 2 unstressed syllables. The more stressed syllables you have in a line, the slower the speed. It slows down. Okay. So, and he laughing said to me. This is an example of a dactyl at the end of the 4th foot. Okay. We'll look at some other examples. Okay, let's look at the second stanza from the same poem, and the rhythm will be clearer to you. Pipe a song about a lamb, so I piped with merry cheer. Piper piped that song again, so I piped he wept to hear. Pipe, remember, pipe has 2 vowels but 1 syllable. The sound is pipe. A song about a lamp, so I piped with merry cheer. Piper, pipe that song again. So I piped, he wept to hear. Read it once again. Read it aloud if possible. You okay? So you have to put the unstress marks as well, very carefully. So is one of 7 coordinating conjunctions. Sometimes it is used as uh, you know, interjection as well. Again, piped is one word, 2 syllables. Sorry, 2 vowels, but 1 syllable, 1 sound. Piper is 2 syllables. Piper. Pipe is 1. You have to be very careful about these. You make a mistake and then the whole rhythmic structure falls apart. Pipe a song about a lamb. Pipe a song about a lamb. So I piped with merry cheer. Piper, pipe that song again. So I piped, he wept to hear. So you have catalectics in every line. So how many meters do you find? Do not count the catalectic as a foot. It is not. Apart from that, how many feet do you find in each line? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So trimeter, trochaic trimeter, variations. Piddic, second line, first foot. Piddic, fourth line, first foot. So trochaic trimeter catalectic with the variations that I have just mentioned. So I hope this was clear. I hope you are having no problem whatsoever following what I am saying, what I am describing. If you have any problem, let me know in the chat box. Okay. Okay, let's look at an example from a play by Shakespeare. How many of you can identify without googling, of course? Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witches, mummy, maw and gulf. This is from a play by Shakespeare, and I'm sure you have read this play already. Right? This is from Macbeth. One of the witch's speeches. Okay. Uh, Caldron is most often cauldron, but the place where I copied it from, that is Poetry Foundation, has this spelling, so we'll go with it. Not much difference, because cauldron and caldron are basically two syllables. Let's call it cauldron. So double, toil and trouble, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron, bubble. So 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. This is a basic rhythm. It's trochaic. So we have a gut feeling that this is trochaic. We are not yet sure. In order to confirm our suspicion, we need to scan the line. We have to identify the multisyllabic words, and we have to put the stress marks in the right places. Trouble is, by the way, two words, right? Two sounds. Double, toil and trouble. Fire is one word, one sound, one syllable, although there are two vowels, I and E. You get one sound, fire. Burn and cauldron is two syllables. Bubble is two syllables as well. Scale is one sound, one syllable. Dragon, two sounds, two syllables. Tooth, one syllable. Wolf, witches, two syllables. Mummy, two syllables. Maw, one syllable. Gulf, which half rhymes with wolf, is one syllable. Or you have toil as well, one syllable. So that's done, and then you have to accentuate. How do you pronounce double? Double, you stress the first syllable. Double, toil and trouble, same as double, trouble. Fire, burn and cauldron or cauldron, bubble. Scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witches, mummy, maw and gulf. Let's put the unstressed marks. Let's divide the metrical structure. Double, toil and trouble. Fire, burn and cauldron, bubble. So we have a couple of iams here, but there seems to be a problem, because you cannot really have an hypermetrical at the end of trochaic line. So you have to do something about it. All you can do is isolate the trochees, and in order to do that you have to separate the first word, first sound in this line, and after that it becomes easier. Burn and cauldron bubble. So instead of having a catalectic at the uh, end of a line, you have an acephalous before the line begins. Right. Next line, scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witches, mummy, maw, and golf. So you have catalectics in the third and fourth lines. In the second line, you have this odd case of a syllable, stressed syllable, being left out at the beginning of a sentence. Okay. Trochaic, trimeter. Sorry, trochaic tetrameter. The first couple of lines. No, sorry, the first line, and then you have an acephalous trimeter. Then you have trimeter catalectics in the third and fourth lines. Okay. Some more examples. Examples are all we are going to look at today. Let's look at a poem by Shelley. The Skylark. To a Skylark, sorry, by P.B. Shelley. Hail to thee, blithe spirit. Blithe is one word. Bird thou never were. Shouldn't be stressed. That from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. unpremeditated art. Unpremeditated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 syllables. Unpremeditated. Too many syllables. So, hail to thee, blit spirit. You have the trochaic rhythm once more. Bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. So this line, the final line, is a bit tricky, but let's deal with the other lines first. Hail to the blit spirit, bird thou never. Sorry, I forgot to put the unstressed mark here. Okay, so you won't have to, you don't have to cut here. You can have a catalectic here. You do have a catalectic here. So, bird thou never wert, that from heaven, sorry, that from heaven or near it, that from heaven or, this comes, all of these syllables come together, heaven or, that from heaven or near it, pourest thy comes together, or maybe not, pourest thy full heart, pourest thy full heart. So you have a catalectic here. Pourest thy full heart. Now you do indeed have a dactyl here. Pourest thy full heart. So let's come to the final line, which is a bit complex, which is a bit different. Not complex really, but different from the other lines. In profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Lots of unstressed syllables. So where do you cut? In profuse strains of unpremeditated art. In profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Notice that this is iambic. So you have a very strange kind of, unusual kind of variation. You have an entire line which is iambic, in a passage which is trochaic. Okay. So this line, the whole of it, can be considered to be a variation in this passage. Apart from other variations like the second foot in the first line, the second foot in the second line, the first foot in the first line, the second foot in the third line, mostly composed of variations, although the rhythm is trochaic. Okay. The next example, questions. Can you repeat? Ishan asks, can you repeat the term you used for the second line of Shakespeare's poem? Shakespeare's poem. You mean double, double, toil and trouble? It's trochaic. The passage is trochaic with variations. Second line. So second line, the first foot was spondy. I'm sorry, fire was isolated, so it's acephalous. You can check